Okay, I am back with my friend Steve Patton. Steve, you've been on before at least once. I think just
Yeah,
once,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah, yeah. This is number two.
This is number two. All right. So I got a message from a buddy of mine. I don't know if he wants me to say who it is publicly, but anyway, a buddy of mine texted me and said, "Dude, you got to talk about Kanye and white evangelicalism on your podcast." I was like, "Man, that's an interesting topic."
Yeah, it
Um,
is.
but I'm like, I don't know if I feel prepared to talk about that. But I think I tweeted that a buddy of mine once wanted me to talk about, just kind of see how people would react to it. And a lot of people kind of jumped in and said, yeah, I think that'd be a good one. But you jumped in, Steve, and said, hey, I got a lot of thoughts if you want to have a dialogue partner. I said,
Yeah.
yes, I do, because I'm not even sure. And so I'll tell my audience that, I'm not exactly, I haven't really thought too much about it. I haven't really followed the conversation too much. I mean, obviously, I know, he had this conversion experience and seems pretty radical. Seems, from the little I've read, super really genuine. And yeah, I do have seen a lot of people kind of now clamoring to sink their claws into Kanye. And that's about it. That's about all I know. So I don't even know if I have strong opinions about anything. So I'm here with my buddy Steve, and I'm just gonna learn. So, Steve, why don't you can set this up however you want. If you want to give a background, however far back you feel like you need to go to get us up to speed, why don't you just go for it, man?
Yeah. So I mean, Kanye and white evangelicalism and this weird marriage that's happening. It's a weird it's a weird marriage that I feel. On one hand, I feel afraid. I feel afraid. I feel afraid for um, the church. I feel afraid for Kanye. I feel afraid for the watching public. On another hand, I feel hopeful for Kanye, um, and hopeful for the kingdom, both kind of all at the same time, but for all different reasons.
Yeah, okay,
Right?
so that's a 30,000-foot level. I got a bunch of keep going,
Yeah,
keep going.
yeah. So, all right. So, I mean, I guess to really understand it, right, you got to go back. You got to go back to the beginning, right? Like Kanye grew up black in Chicago. He went to church. And if you listen to Kanye's music, there's always church references, right? I mean, of course, there was the song he had, Jesus Walks, which ironically was primarily written by a Muslim. You can do with that what you want, right? Ryan Fest primarily wrote Jesus Walks, and he's a devout Muslim. So, right there's already some interesting thoughts there, right? But he had Jesus Walks, and there's always church and Jesus references in his music, right? Like on I think it was on Diamonds from Sierra Leone, where he was like, the preacher said we need leaders right then. My body got still like a paraplegic, right? Said no, he got baptized, let the water wash over my Caesar, right? So there's always been these references to Jesus and to church. And then as time went on, you start, especially after the death of his mom, he's trying to grasp at stuff. And then you hear him talking about right now he don't need drugs no more. It's just sex and religion. No more drugs for me. Edited version. Sex and religion is all I need. Nah, right? It's always no church in the wild, right? There's always been these religious overtones to his music. So then you fast forward the clock to last year. All these, this because Kanye is by and large, in spite of all his other influences like EDM and punk and uh, electronic music, like all these other influences, Kanye has still always tried to curate a black music experience in his music, right? So when he started doing the Sunday service stuff, I was like, well, yeah, duh. I mean, of course. Now, let me back up. His involvement in specifically white evangelicalism started picking up a bit. Married Kim Kardashian, Rich Wilkerson did their wedding. So his feet, he started going to their church, right? So he started dipping his foot in that world even more. And so in Kanye being the Black music experience curator that he is, he starts doing gospel music. I mean, he said like 5 years ago that he was going to do a gospel album, and eventually he was only going to do stuff for the church, right? And this was when he was, this is when he was still, you know, out there. So he does the Sunday service ceremonies or services, whatever you want to call them, right? They think he calls them service, so we'll call them Sunday services. Okay. Not church stuff. They weren't church services, but they were experiences. You know, he wanted to use lighting to impact how people would feel, and music and moods and all of that, weaving all he's learned about texture and all of that into the experience to try to create some kind of, I think he told Letterman on the show on Netflix that he was trying to create some healing experiences, right? And using the light and other textures and feels to, you know, influence how we feel to lead towards some healing. So he's doing those, and I'm watching, and I'm like, okay, yeah, Kanye, you know, he dabbling into the religious stuff now, like deeper. Okay. And so he does Coachella. And out of Kanye's own mouth in the interview, I think it was with Zane Lowe, he said it was, so he's already doing these services for like 5-6 months. Uh-huh. And it was before the one he did on Coachella was the one where he felt like, you know, God was calling him into something and he wanted to give his life to Jesus. That's when that's what he counts as his conversion experience. So
even though he has this long history of church and gospel, he himself would pinpoint as he would say he wasn't converted in his own words. I mean,
in his words, I think the way he described it is living his life for God.
Okay.
Right. So to me and you, yeah, we would count that as like, you know, when you're for real about your conversion. Yeah. Right. Okay. Not answering the altar call and doing the prayer and going your way, but like saying, I'm going to give my life to God
right. But he wasn't completely outside the church culture or even the church in general. He would just maybe look at his personal kind of conversion experience more recently.
Yeah, again, so he church adjacent. You know what I'm saying? It's there, but he was never really like, you know, he would say stuff like, you know, we formed a new religion, no sins unless there's permission. Deception is the only felony, so don't sleep with nobody without telling me, right? Like he would say stuff like that in his music. So I would not say that he was in the church, right? But you know, when he did the Yeezus album, he was at like Rich Wilkerson's church. Rich Wilkerson even helped him craft his stage theme, which is a discussion for another day that we don't have to get into. That white evangelicalism helped him plan that his own self-described blasphemous concert. But we can dive into that as part of.
I don't know, man. You piqued my interest. We can maybe come back to that, but I don't want to just say we're not going to go there.
I can't throw that grenade and leave it there.
No.
But
right, keep going.
No, but I guess to speak to that, right? That is part of the thing that as you look at what's happening now, right? Since he's made this confession of faith and made this public confession of faith and put out 2 gospel albums, you know, since then, and you know, dude's not been in his own words, right? He ain't been living it like that for a year, right? We're less than a year from Coachella, you know, last Easter. Okay. So, and a friend of mine was actually at that. My coworker of mine was actually at that show. He was like, "Man, that show was incredible." And he's not a believer either. He just thought it was a really good experience. But you know, since all of that, and now he's, you know, he was already on the Trump train, which we can talk about. His whole thing now, and how, you know, he's doing the stuff with Joel Osteen and like white evangelicalism helped him crafting that concert. It's because on the white evangelicalism side of things, mirrored with Kanye, there's this need to wield power, right? It's this need to wield power and influence, right? Power, influence. That's the name of the game. That's the chief currency in that world. It's not even necessarily money, right? It's power and influence, right? That's the idol Power and influence is the idol of white evangelicalism.
Hmm.
And I say that as a black man who is a survivor of white evangelicalism. It is the right. It is the currency of white evangelicalism. So here's an opportunity for someone to hitch their wagon to one of the biggest artists in the world.
Yeah.
And regardless of if his stuff is blasphemous or not, it's referencing Jesus. So for them, that's enough to want to latch their hook to it, hitch their wagons to it. And now they can say, hey, I was involved with this. Simultaneously, I got a book coming out, and simultaneously I got there was a reality TV show coming, right? So there was all of that being able to hitch their wagon to that power and that influence. And simultaneously, that's what Ye wants. Like he wants, I would say, power, influence, and acceptance.
So you're not saying that Kanye is simply a victim of the power and influence drive of white evangelicalism. You're saying that he too is like it's a mutual kind of relationship.
Absolutely.
Would you say so? So would you? And this is in your perspective, your opinion, or whatever. I mean, do you see Kanye going towards white evangelicalism because he sees more power and influence there than, say, going back to his sort of black gospel Chicago kind of roots? Or
no, I think it's twofold. I think one, he goes to the white evangelical / right wing conservative side of things on one hand because he's been rejected by the air quote liberal. I hate that phrase, but for the sake of common language, the liberal side, right? Like when Obama dissed Kanye, that hit him harder than I think anyone publicly is willing to accept. I mean, Kanye said it, right? He said, I was an abomination to Obama's nation, but that's a really bad way to start a conversation.
Wait. So so I'm not familiar with this because again, I haven't followed Kanye at all. So Obama dissed Kanye?
Yeah, I think he called him a jerk or something like that. But yeah, there was Obama dissed Kanye publicly.
Wow.
Right? He said something negative about Kanye. So that coupled with when the backlash that he got going back to George Bush doesn't care about black people.
Yeah.
Right? He got super backlash from that. Right. And then he got dissed by Obama. Right. So now it's like, well, what do? I didn't mean to offend the people that I offended what I said. And now here's these other people that I thought I was trying to latch on to. And then they diss me. And not only is this there's the first black president who's from my town. Right. He's from my city that I put on for. Like we both supposed to put over. And then he the most powerful man in the world, and he dissed the person, at least in Kanye's mind, he's the most powerful artist in the world, right? So now he's struck. He had no home, and then he goes on the Watch the Throne album, and he says, talking about his future children, if he has a son, saying I might even tell him to vote Republican, just so they know that he loves white people.
So the whole Trump kind of thing going on in Kanye, which was a year ago, a couple years ago or something, and he's sporting the MAGA hat. So you're saying that's the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot going on for the last couple decades that kind of played into him going that route, right?
On top of the fact, Kanye, one of the things that is consistent throughout Kanye's career is you're not going to tell him what he's not going to do.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Regardless of if he should do it or not. Right. He would do things that, no, you shouldn't do that. But he would do it anyway because you're not going to tell him what he's not going to do. And now you're telling him you're black. You can't support Trump.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
Who are you to tell me that I can't support anybody that I want to support? If I want to support him, I should be able to support him because I want to. Obama didn't support me. Look what happened when I went over here to support them. Look what happened. And now you're telling me I can't support them? Why not?
Why is it wrong for me to kind of appreciate that aspect of Kanye?
No,
Like
I
I
don't.
look at that, I'm like, dude, he's not playing the tribal game. He's not gonna be stuffed in this little box. He's not gonna let other people play the kind of like identity politics and say, oh, this is who you are and this is who you must be and this is who you must. Like I don't know. I gotta appreciate that about him, even though I'm not a Trump fan at all. I mean,
Right. Now, here's why that scares me, though.
yeah,
Because he's experienced on the, whatever side, liberal side, mainstream side, right? That's what you can't do, right? And he's used to that kind of legalism from the, from the left,
yeah,
because that's what that is. That's legalism.
yeah, yeah.
What he's not experienced yet is the legalism on the right. When they start telling him what he can and can't do, what he can and can't support, where he can and can't go, where he can and can't do shows, it's gonna backfire.
Now here's my question: is will white evangelicalism, um, will they place those kind of standards on him for fear, or will they just let Kanye be Kanye so that they can have Kanye? Like, because if they rock the boat a little too much, they might lose him. Or
When has white evangelicalism ever let somebody else dictate the terms to them or what they are or not going to be? How'd that go for Francis Chan?
Yeah.
How's that going for right? How's that going for anybody when they do anything that's not hey, you can't go over there with them. You can't sit with, like, you don't even know what's going on over here, but
yeah.
you gonna tell me that I just, how'd that go for Lecrae?
Yeah. So I do have a clarifying question, and I'm sure my audience is probably asking this. Like, when you say white evangelicalism, what are you saying? Obviously, you're not saying every white evangelical. When I hear you saying white evangelicals, it's almost like this. Like, I can picture and probably name the kinds of tribes you're talking about. It's almost like Republican celebrity driven, yeah, or even Joel Osteen, like those kind of big mega kind of power driven. But certainly I wouldn't, if you went into like a white Anabaptist church in Canada or something, they're going to be maybe left leaning or moderate. They're not going to be Trump voters. They're going to be not. They're going to feel very different than what you're labeling white evangelicalism. Would that be an accurate assessment? Or I'm putting words in your. Why don't you unpack what you mean by white evangelicalism?
No, you're about spot on. Like, I feel like, all right, probably too deep of an answer, right? But I'd say this just to clarify on vocabulary.
Yeah.
I remember I talked to this guy one time. He worked for the dictionary. He worked for Webster's Dictionary, and it was the year that I talked to him. It was the year they put bootylicious into the English lexicon. Right? They pick a word every year to put in, and bootylicious was the word that year.
As it should be. No.
Right, right. Shout out to Beyonce changing the language. And so I asked him how did he feel about bootylicious going into the dictionary. Right, I didn't like it, but I wonder how he felt. He said he didn't have a problem with it at all, and I was thrown off by that. I was like, "Why do you say that?" He said, "Because the dictionary does not define the words that we use. The dictionary is a written history of how we use words.
It's a result of usage, not a cause of usage."
Right, right. The dictionary doesn't tell us what a word means. It just documents how we use it. So just as Tim Keller has been, great at redefining what the word religion is, I think that in the last probably 10 or so years, not 10 years, since Bush, I'd say since Bush, the word evangelical doesn't mean what it used to mean, right? So, like, those original definitions of evangelical, you really only checked about 4 or 5 boxes to classify as an evangelical, right? Like, do you believe the Bible's true? Do you want to share your faith, right? If you check off those boxes, you're an evangelical.
Yeah.
Primarily centered around, sharing your faith and holding traditional, biblical views. That's not the definition today.
It's way more political today, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't. If you're a Christian who is left of center theologically and a Democrat, you probably wouldn't even call yourself an evangelical. Like I feel like it has such a distinct Republican white kind of flavor to it, right?
I mean, there are many things that are on the if we were checking off boxes of beliefs that I would subscribe to on that many who would consider themselves white evangelicals would. There are also other things that I'm convinced, especially from my time of pastoring, that there are people who consider themselves white evangelicals that don't check even some of the core boxes of what an evangelical is. Like, hey, sharing your faith, like evangelism is core to evangelicalism. But you don't believe that you even can or should in any way, or in practice, even if you check the box, in practice you don't, right? So that's why I say, like, the definition of what evangelical is so different. And again, I attribute a lot of that to I can't think of the dude's name, the dude that put together George Bush's campaign.
Bush Jr., right? No,
Bush Jr. Yeah, Bush Jr. I forget his name, but yeah, that dude, that was evil. But he,
it's interesting. It actually makes sense now. So like last year, I was in Cleveland at a largely black church doing a conference, and I met with a bunch of pastors, all African American. Before the conference, we had a great conversation. I'm one of the guys who was a brilliant dude. I mean, this guy was off the chart. Just read everything. He kept referring to himself as, back in the days when I was an evangelical. He kept referring to evangelical as something he came out of. But he was theologically, he was very conservative, and we lined up on all kinds of stuff. And finally, I said, "What do you mean by evangelical?" Because he keeps saying you're not, but then you're talking very evangelical. And it was exactly this. It was when he left kind of more of a, I don't know if he would say like white dominated, but more kind of a Republican political kind of socially conservative brand of
white culture,
culture,
Western white culturally dominated Christianity, where cultural values and even things that are called biblical values aren't driven by what Scripture says is true. Is driven by what's true of culture and true what's normative for their culture, and then they use Scripture to back it up. Right? Like Scripture does not create a normative of a biblical mandate that a man should be the only one who works and a woman should be the one in the house raising children, right? That's a very white middle class 1950s cultural, Americana view. However, let them tell it, if you're not that, you're not a good Christian. You're definitely not a good man, and you're not a good Christian if your wife works. Like, I was in a setting one time where a woman said, right, the pastor's wife, the lead pastor's wife said, if you talking about women, because we were talking about the tension in the church of wives who work, right?
Of all the things going on in the church, that's
oh my gosh. So the wife says, if you're a mom who works, I question if you love your children. Right? Now, me and a few other people, we were high-key offended, and we spoke up. Right? My wife beat me to it. Usually I'm like, babe, let me handle this one. She looked at me, she was like, no, I got this. I'm going in. Right? So, but those are the kinds of things, right? We're talking about white evangelicalism. It's like, it's when it's white cultural norms become the driver of what is allegedly biblically true, right?
It's a culture created largely by white evangelicals. So that you could even be part of that culture and not even be white and still, or you could be white evangelical and not be a white evangelical in that cultural sense that you're talking about.
Oh, say that again.
Like you could, like there's like you can be not white and still be of that culture and buy into
absolutely
it, and vice versa. You can be white and not resonate with that culture. Like I mean, I would say I would be criticized by white evangelical culture, even though I'm as white as they can be. Because I don't match up to the culture that's been created in the wake of
Yes.
largely white leadership.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. I know some white dudes that are Christian that are, and I don't mean like, you know, they lean super left.
No, yeah.
Some do, but I don't mean that they lean super left or anything. They're just culturally like, nah, I don't jive with that at all. Right? Like my guy Alex early, like Alex is white. Alex is a white dude. Like he's a white dude, right? Love that guy. But he's a Christian. Like love like that dude, what like over the years, somebody I've grown to love and respect through and through. That dude is he's not evangelical. He's not a white evangelical. Not a white evangelical at all. And then I know, shoot, for a while I was in my attempts, and we can save this for another podcast, but in my attempts to bring a form of the type of reform that I think is needed in the church with regard to, you know, multi-ethnic church, in my attempt to reform the white evangelical church towards multiculturalism, I was absolutely in white evangelicalism. I was in white evangelicalism. Yeah. I kind of had foot in, foot out for the purposes of trying to bring reform in it. A fight I am no longer willing to fight. Yeah.
I hate that. Well, we need to get back to Kanye, but maybe we can tag that because I mean, your story is fascinating because I mean, you started out on the non-white evangelical, you know, like very anti, right? And then you swung all the way, not all the way, but I mean, with one foot in, one foot out, and then I'd be curious maybe your reflections where you're at now. But let's maybe set that aside. Let's get back to Kanye. So if I can summarize and we can keep going, it's the grasp toward power and influence that is underlying a lot of the kind of Kanye interest and craze. And I also hear you saying like white evangelicalism hasn't really considered like his as if he just kind of like his church experience has just kind of happened like 6 months ago, where like he does have a long history here that people haven't really considered.
But at the same time, what they're not considering is that, yes, he's only been a Christian since April. The dude got saved. Imagine, right? Imagine for the pastors that are listening, right? Imagine you have Easter service, Easter Sunday, right? It's Super Bowl Sunday for you as a church, right? Everything is growing great. Everything is going fine. Services are going incredible. And then somebody gets up and whatever your mechanism is to call people to faith, be it an altar call, be it, grabbing lunch with you to discuss following Jesus, whatever your mechanism is to catch people who feel like either they're making a decision for Jesus or, they feel irresistibly drawn to follow Jesus now, whatever that is, right? Your mechanism to capture that on that Sunday, right? Last Easter, 2019. 6 months later, you're giving him a platform and you're taking him on tour and letting him preach to your congregations and going on your book tours with you. And when you get invited to preach, you take him with you and you got him going all out and preaching. Now, as a pastor, you would feel like you were mishandling the sheep. You should feel like you're mishandling the sheep. That person is a novice. That dude went to Bible study one time, and now you're like, yo, you're a leader.
Yeah.
Right? You wouldn't take the guy who was the CEO at a Fortune 500 company and said, hey, now that he's someone who has clearly some leadership capabilities, and you wouldn't turn around 6 months later and put him on your executive team. If you do, you're a charlatan. Like, I'm just going to call you out on that. Like, if you do, you are using people. Now, that might actually be more common in white evangelicalism, actually, because power and influence. But at least as long as it remains hypothetical, you say you wouldn't do that. But in practice, doing it with Kanye right now.
Would you say it wouldn't happen in a black church? Like they wouldn't be I'll say using or lurching after Kanye in the same way that white evangelicals are? Do you see a difference?
So here's the way I would see it. The way it would happen, the way it happened in the black church. Now so for this example, we're going to remove the white evangelicalism embracing from this equation for now.
Okay.
Right. Because the black church views it very interestingly, because they're looking at it like, yo, they're using you. Like
Really?
they look at it and see it like, bro, they're using you. What are you doing?
Huh.
Like, what are you doing? Like, they're clearly using you. Now, the black church would absolutely be quick to forgive and embrace Kanye. Quick on that. The black church, a lot of times to a fault, quick to forgive someone in their, the process from repentance to restoration is short, traditionally in the black church, right? Especially if you've got a gift. Now, Kanye likely would be somebody's choir director right away. he would, no, even if he's not the director, he would be in the music ministry right away. Probably wouldn't be director right away because that would just look bad. But he'd be involved in music ministry right away. But that's largely where it would stop. Wouldn't nobody be up there asking him his thoughts about a thing? They would just say, hey, the way they would use him is say, hey, you make music. Let's make music. Right? Because the black church is great for letting some, it's funny. The black church is historically homophobic.
Yeah.
And historically the producers and promoters and supporters of a whole lot of gay black gospel singers. It will go just like this. But he can sing though, right? You know what I mean? Like we will tell you it's a sin and you going to hell with no question. Coming up next, right? But before he repented, right? Coming up next, Donnie McClurkin, right?
So they're very generous with
the grace,
offering a hand to the music ministry.
Yeah. But it would stop there, right? And they would they leverage him like, hey, we got some killer music. You need to come through for the music, for sure, no question. But are they going to put him out there for to promote his ideas and his views? No.
Like he would still be expected to be like the pastor, the elders, the deacons would still be his authority. Like ain't no way he's going to get into that level anytime soon. Okay.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: how much of so all I know is that he's on stage with Joel Osteen, and Osteen's really going after him. Is that, I mean, but I know a lot of people, even a lot of people within white evangelicalism who would be extremely critical of Joel Osteen, who wouldn't be, who wouldn't want to claim him as their own. Has there been pushbacks from within white evangelicalism to kind of his rush to the stage, so quickly?
Only the ones who. Okay, so I'll say this. I won't be as snarky as I was about to be.
It's theology in the raw, bro. You can do what you want.
I know people who were I personally know people who are critical of Joel Osteen.
Yeah.
White evangelicals.
Yeah.
Who are critical of Joel Osteen, who were at that Kanye show at Joel Osteen's church.
Oh, come on, seriously?
That's serious. That's serious. Yeah. I mean, other people there, white evangelicals from Houston, critical of Joel Osteen. The first time they went to Lakewood was for the Kanye concert.
Yeah, free concert, man.
Hey, free concert of Kanye? Come on, man. Can't miss that. I got to be there for that, man. I got to show that I'm in the know. I got to show that I'm in the circles. Yeah.
So where is this? So you're, are you faulting Kanye, or are you putting the fault more on the people that are, grasping onto him?
So my fault is more on them than him.
Okay.
Because again, if we get back to especially his need for acceptance,
Okay.
right? So let's say his conversion is real, right? Let's set aside the fact he surely hasn't repented from his arrogance, right? Humility is not a mark of his life yet, which it shouldn't be. He's a new believer,
Right. Yeah.
right? Which the Bible says is the reason why he shouldn't be in leadership, because he's a new believer, because that junk's gonna go to his head,
Yeah.
and he don't need nothing else to go to his head, right? So, and I want to address that quickly soon too. But right, so he's got this need to be accepted, right? And he's put his faith in. If his conversion is legit, right, yeah, he should have a need to be accepted, because that's what you get saved to God and to His people. So
Right.
yeah, he should feel like he's got somewhere he should be able to go and latch onto and grow with and all of that, right? Now he's got all this other stuff going on where these people he's latching onto should have a system in place that deals with, how do you deal with new believers, people aspiring towards leadership? Because make no mistake about it, the dude is aspiring towards leadership. It's one of my great fears for him. If you listen to him, the dude wants to essentially start a cult, but we can go there in a second. Right? It should be all of these, solid leadership and, accountability and all of these mechanisms in place for the stuff that could go wrong to not happen, because the community that he's a part of has all of these things. That's this community that has, a multi-millennia history, has stuff in place that should be able to have guardrails to keep him healthy as he's trying to navigate all of this stuff that he's got to navigate. But they don't use them. They don't use those guardrails. They don't leverage that leadership. They don't do all the stuff that they should, right? The stuff is there. So I fault them, right? I fault them. If a guy accidentally walks into an airport with a gun in his backpack, he might have legit went hunting or something. They went shooting and he put the gun in his pack, hanging with his boys. They went target shooting and he forgot to take the gun out of his backpack. I fault him a little bit for forgetting to take the gun out of his pack, but if the gun makes it onto the plane, I fault TSA.
Right.
Kanye's got the gun. The church is the TSA that's supposed to be the securities checkpoints to guard him from himself and him from us in the times where it's harmful, and they're not doing it.
Yeah. So he's aspiring for leadership. You're saying he's not just wanting to be a converted singer, artist, now gospel singer, whatever, that's gonna be on stage as a singer. He actually wants to be in like intellectual or pastoral kind of leaders, like at that level.
He wants to create, like, if you listen to him, he wants to create a society.
Oh wow.
He's got all his land. He's thinking about the architecture for the land. He tried to build it in Calabasas. It didn't work because of building permits. They told him he couldn't build his building too high. So he left Calabasas and went out to the mountains of Montana, and he's trying to build it out there. And he's trying to grow his own. He wants to have a fully sustained society where they grow their own stuff. They grow their own materials to sew clothes. He's trying to figure out how to grow blue cotton and junk like that, right?
Yeah.
Right. And this isn't like weird conspiracy theory stuff. Like, I'm only saying the stuff that he said. Like, you listen to his interviews, like, this is the stuff that he's talked about. So, the Forbes interview and the Zane Lowe interview, like, this is the stuff that he's talked about, right? He wants to create this society. He wants to be a leader. He said he wants to be the greatest Christian artist ever, right? He wants to top Rembrandt and all of these other great Christian artists. He wants to be seen as the apex of them all. He wants to be an apex leader, and he wants to create this society, and people are listening to him, and people are my fear is, people are following him and like, wait, so you got all of that, and you got this dude with a huge amount of hubris armed with the God said card.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you peep, there was a clip somebody released when he was at Joel Osteen's church. And he was preaching, because that's what he's doing. He was preaching. And somebody was giving him an amen from the crowd. somebody was excited. Amen, preach, yeah, yeah, and he stopped him. Kanye stopped him. He said, "I'm trying to be, brother. I'm asking, can you not do that? Can you not do that? Because I'm trying to receive from God right now. I'm trying to let Him flow through me right now, and I don't need those distractions. I need it quiet so that I can be a vessel, so God can flow through me right now and speak the words through me right now. So don't interrupt that, right?" And people applauded that and then stopped. But I'm like, okay, so what you're saying is the words that are coming out of your mouth, they're just from heaven and out your mouth.
Yeah, wow.
Right? You've armed the person with the biggest ego with the God said card.
Wow. Yeah. And that wouldn't go. I mean, to tell people not to say amen, that can only work in a white church, right? It's not going to work
for real. For real. That's only going to work in white culture, man.
One little white dude in the front row, amen,
That's only gonna work in white culture, man. You come to black church, can't say amen. It's like, we gotta escort this brother out. No, it's gonna be a church mother in the back saying, "You can't stop her, amen." You can't stop my hallelujah. So, yeah. That's just some of my thoughts on Kanye. It's complex, right? It's a dangerous marriage that I think is. On some aspects, mutual usury, right? One using the other. One, is basically Donald Trump's "look at my African American," right? Look at my African American over there, right?
Oh, Trump! He that's probably the most excited he's ever been when he saw Kanye sporting the MAGA hat. Oh my word!
But here's where it's going to go weird. Here's one area where I think it's going to go weird. Right? Kanye still talks about social justice.
Huh.
He still talks about prison reform heavy. The song with him and Fred Hammond, he's just going in about prison reform.
Huh.
Right? And so that's going to, like, you can't start talking about prison reform without getting into the prison industrial complex.
Yeah.
Right? The school to pipeline prison, right? Like, once you start getting into all of that, like, and then being from Chicago, like, you're only going to go so far without getting into the points that white evangelicalism is uncomfortable talking about.
Which that could be a good thing. Could that be a good thing? I mean, he could be smuggling in some challenging things into the white evangelical complex. No.
That ain't how it works.
Okay.
That ain't how it works. You can't smuggle in with them. Yeah. It is what it is. You can't smuggle in with them. They'll tolerate a certain amount, and then as soon as this, like, wait, this is wildly uncomfortable for me, there's no changing. I'm not changing. You are. You're not changing. You got to go.
Let me give you a parallel. I think so. Like when John Piper started talking about racial reconciliation, his book Bloodlines, and really push some people's thinking pretty hard, but it only could go so far. Once Lecrae starts tweeting about here's my ancestors on 4th of July 200 years ago picking cotton, and I mean he did several things where he kind of like, people said we're willing to go here, but don't take us here. And so now you see a lot of kind of backlash where I thought 10 years ago there was a lot of inroads in the Southern Baptist Church and just kind of more Reformed circles with racial reconciliation, but it seems like as long as it's kind of under our own terms, like
as long as I don't have to change,
right. And I don't want to say that categorically, but I have seen like it's like racial reconciliation with underneath a white evangelical umbrella. Like, don't change our white reform culture. Don't change our white reform music. Don't, our leadership still is going to be largely white. But hey, we need to have racial reconciliation. And
yeah, we do. You need to be
the first step, but it's like, I think it's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, they say we need racial reconciliation. You need to be more like us. Done.
Is that okay? Why don't you just keep going there for a little bit? I think this is important enough to hear.
Yeah, and I think it's pertinent to the Kanye conversation. It's Be like us. Yeah, absolutely. Let's have racial reconciliation. Let's reconcile. And then when you start talking about what needs to be reconciled, it's like, yeah, you need to be more like us in that. Yeah, I don't have to change that. You need to change that. You need to, as long as this is it. Yeah. This was something that, and it's a conversation that me and many minorities kind of in that space have. Be yourself. Oh, no, not like that. Not like that. Don't be yourself like that. Be yourself like me. Just be the brown version of me. Okay, that's what I need you to do. I need you to be the brown version of me. You be the brown version of me. I'm all for racial reconciliation.
So you're speaking from, experience from talking to people. Especially when you were church planning and a pastor, you pastored in three different cities, right? Hard like. Well, okay. Let me ask you this, because I think my audience is largely white. I don't know the percentages, but a lot of white people that I think are going to resonate with what you're saying, actually. So, what would true racial reconciliation look like in the church? Give us like concrete, like here's what a healthy version of that would look like.
Yeah, it would look like church leadership being equally diverse, right? It's, people of color, and white people together, leading together as equals, right? Where the white man doesn't have more voice than the black man or the Latino or the Asian man. They're equals. And the black person isn't the black and Latinos aren't brought in to speak about racial stuff. They're brought in to speak about stuff, right? They're brought in to speak about. We're going to hear from here's our like here's one attempt that I always see done in, I think, from a good place, but they get the one, especially if they're a foreign ethnic minority, right? If they're like not from America, oh man, we got a missions trip coming up. You get to give the announcement about that. Oh man, we about to go paint fences with brown people. Let's put up a brown person and tell them about it, right? Like it's, it's, hey, let's have the Asian dude the financial update every time. People trust Asians in numbers. Let's have the Asian dude get the financial update every time. That's all. That's the only time we hear from them. Not for announcements, not for baptisms, none of that. Yeah. You do the money. No, you don't baptize anybody. We don't want you teaching. You don't lead no Bible studies. Nope. Give us a financial update. That's your job. That's it, right? No, yeah. Like, so where there's genuine mutuality, where people are allowed to, where a church has a theological culture that allows people to navigate their own cultural norms through the lens of the Bible without having to adapt the dominant group's culture. Mm-hmm. Right? Where a Somalian family can come into the church and navigate their own cultural issues through the Bible without having to adopt being what it's like to live like a white person, right? They can keep the parts of their culture that aren't anti-biblical, right? But they're able to navigate that in a way as they live that out. They're not seen as being in sin because they don't do it the way depending on where you are, white people live. Like here, where I live, now, I don't think it's good to yell at your kids in public. I don't think you've committed this grave sin. Yeah. I just don't think it's good. Like, don't do that. Like that's embarrassing, Yeah. But I don't think you committed this grave sin. But in Seattle, yell at your kids in public? Oh my gosh. First of all, to have more than 2 kids in public might be a sin in Seattle. But to yell at your kids in public? Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh my gosh, how dare you? You should be a better parent. Like Jesus doesn't like that. Jesus, right? So but like you come from another country. It's, hey, get over here, hurry up. Yeah. Right? We think about all the stuff we need to keep you safe from. I don't have time to figure out your love language. No, get over here and don't run into the street.
Yeah.
right? But being able to navigate those cultural differences in a way where you won't be villainized for navigating it different, right? Those are just some of the things, right? Those are just some of the things.
One thing I've tried to learn, and I'm on a journey, I'm growing, and there's so many blind spots I have, but even just understanding just church culture, modern church culture does have a distinct whiteness to it. I don't know, I could several things I can say, but I mean, the music for one, like it's, and I don't want to, again, I don't want to speak categorically like all white people have like this kind of music, whatever, but like it does, you go into a largely, black church or a church of more color where white is a minority, and it's going to feel different. It's probably going to be much longer. It's going to be more vibrant. People are going to be speaking back. Like, it's just going to have a different feel to it. The songs aren't all going to be written by white people, and that's going to, I mean, that does affect lyrics when it comes from white evangelicals and on and on and on. And again, I don't, there's no, I think just being self-aware of how much our white majority ethnicity affects how we do things. There's a lot of, it's like, it's like the fish in water. He doesn't know what water is. That's all he's known. It's
exactly.
Just being able to step outside the water and reflect on how somebody who's not white could feel unintentionally uncomfortable, or just not feel like they're as a first class citizen in this place, because they feel like they are in a foreign culture, even though they're fully American and speak English and so on.
Man, I remember on that note, right? I remember I was at a church. One of the things I was, in part because of passion and in part kind of assigned to do is just kind of help the church towards being a more diverse church, right? And so we were in San Jose, which is a pretty diverse city, right? It's basically like a third white, a third Asian, a third Latino, and a little bit African American, African sprinkled in there, right?
Yeah.
And especially where we were kind of in like a lot of the intersection of that physically. And so we were like, man, we got to make some strides quick here. Like, they were like, so they just said, hey, what's just a quick win? What's a quick way where we can like begin to embrace the people, the few that are already here that are not like everyone else? I said, hey, let's get fella scripture reading. Let's do scripture reading in another language. Spanish. Let's get them up there. We'll put it up in English so people who don't speak Spanish can follow along. But then we'll just let fella get up there. Spanish is his first language. Let him get up there, speak Spanish. He gets up there, and dude is like, East San Jose, just like straight up like Mexican, like just Chicano culture dude, right? Like he even like talk like this, right? He just like straight, like I loved it. Like yeah, he was himself. Oh, like I loved it. So we was like, yo, let's invite him. He said he'd do it. He gets up there, he reads in Spanish. Into the service, white dude comes up to me. He goes, hey man, I was uncomfortable. Like, what do you mean? Man, I was uncomfortable up there hearing him, read in Spanish, man. It just made me uncomfortable, man. It's not my first language. Like, I don't even know what he was saying, and it just made me uncomfortable. And I said to him, so imagine how he feels every Sunday.
Yeah.
Imagine what his experiences is like every Sunday. Yeah. The dude just looked at me and went, I've never thought about that.
Wow. Well, that's a great response. I mean, he received it?
He took it on the chin. I don't know if he received it, but he just took it on the chin and walked away. He was also the one that would always bring up, hey, man, I don't know what to do with the Trayvon Martin stuff. He was that guy too. So, but yeah.
Do you see, do you have examples of churches doing it well? I mean, of course there is. But do you know any off the top of your head, or people, or whatever?
Yeah. Man, I think Durham Gray out in Charlotte, South Carolina. Transformation Church. Yeah. Leon's Crump out in Atlanta, Renovation Church. Ryan Kwan up in Hayward, California, and down in just down in the South Bay area. I'm trying to think of some other. There's a few others that I think are. There's a few others that I think are doing it well from the gate. I know Brian Loritz has had a history of doing it. Yeah, so I mean, there's a few guys that I think are doing it. There's a few. Oh my gosh. Oh, Mark Damas, right? Mark Damas out out in Little Rock.
Yeah, Mosaics, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I think they do it well. Low key, people gonna hate, but I think being in the Seattle area, Judah Smith, every time I go there, I mean, I've been in, I go to their Kirkland, Washington campus, right? How generic is Kirkland, Washington? It's Costco's brand, right? If you want a generic thing, you get the Kirkland brand. That's Kirkland, right? It's generic white culture out there, right? Yeah. But you go into you go into their campus over there, and it's the most diverse church I've seen in the region.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Huh. So you got those, a few of those that I can think of off top that I think do it. Even if they're failing, points where they're failing, they're failing well.
Yeah. One more question, and I'll let you go, man. Going back to Kanye, where's Kim at on all this? Is she like the pastor's wife now, or is she? Do we know anything about her relationship to his story?
Here's just the things that I've seen. The things that I've seen is, one, it's caused her to embrace some more of her Armenian roots. So I think she's going back to I saw a picture of her where I think she was getting baptized back in the Armenian church.
Okay. You're saying Armenian, like the ethnicity, not
the ethnicity, not the yeah. Very, very good point to clarify. Yeah, so seeing her embrace more of that. I know I've seen Kanye and her talk about publicly, her not dressing as I don't know the word you want to use, but being more covered up, right? Just being more covered up in the photos that they post publicly.
It's kind of the elephant in the room a little bit. I'm like, I don't know, pastor's wife. This is interesting, but
yeah. So I mean, so there has been that element. Of course, Trump used her as kind of use her platform again, power and influence. You want to get somebody to talk about prison reform? Let's get Kim Kardashian.
Yeah.
Huh? Oh, well, she did the video because she saw a video and posted it and showed she cared about prison reform. And her dad used to be a lawyer, so let's use her to talk about prison reform because that makes sense. But no, it's white evangelicalism. Yeah. It's that white evangelical, conservative, Republican leverage influence. Because who has more influence than the Kardashians right now?
Right.
Not many.
Yeah.
Not many. So, and now we've got the husband to a Kardashian.
Yeah.
Who was already one of the biggest artists in the world.
Right. Yeah. If you could add up Kim Kardashian and Kanye's Twitter following combined, or just social. I mean, my goodness, they're two of the most. Together, some of the most influential people in the world.
Yeah, I mean,
they got more followers than the Pope.
The Kardashians leveraged fame for wealth, not the other way around. Yeah. You know what I mean? One of them became a billionaire because she came up with her own lipstick line and leveraged her influence for it, and now she's a billionaire.
Yeah.
Right? They leverage fame for wealth. And so who's got more power and influence than them right now? Nobody.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm convinced, just based on little stuff I've seen, little stuff I've heard, you may be hearing the beginnings or the beginning of the foundation being laid for Kardashian political life.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
As in Kim?
Yeah, at least Kim, if not Kim and Kanye, but at least Kim. Kim hasn't said as many stupid things as Kanye to hang them up on, but I mean, if the guy who currently is in there, if he can get in, I don't think it's really going to
That's
hurt.
exactly what I was going to say. We've seen Trump in the office. So 5 years ago, I would have said, no way. But I'm like, yeah, sure. Why not? Hey.
Right. Let's see what it's got to say. Got some ideas. But my last thoughts on Kanye and white evangelicalism. I'm fearful because, again, it's power, influence, and they're just leveraging it to promote their own stuff, right? Even I've watched white evangelicalism chew up people and throw them away as soon as they disagree, right? I've watched it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. So I'm fearful that that's going to happen to him. I'm fearful that once that happens, Black believers are going to be like, bro, I told you so, and now you're trying to crawl to us to get your foot back. You was using them. I'm afraid you're trying to use us too, right? Quasi Pauline, like, hey, this dude was just killing us. This dude was just killing us. I don't know if we should trust him, right? So I fear that's going to happen. I fear this whole backlash is going to go all bad, and then at best it's just going to become a footnote in Kanye's wild career of, hey, you had the old Kanye, then his mom died, and then you had wild Kanye, and then you got, like you had with Mace, right? You got the Jesus following Kanye, gospel music Kanye, and then there's going to be, I'm afraid there's going to be a post era of that Kanye. Where I'm hopeful is that, hey, his conversion might be legit, and he just gets out of music and focuses on, his life and growing himself and his family and trying to create in that way, and encouraging artists to be more creative. And I'm hopeful because, hey, let's say this whole conversion thing is real, right? Let's say it's real. God's scattering seeds. How do we know that God's just not using Kanye to throw them seeds, right? He's scattering seeds. They might fall on the concrete, right? But Kanye's own experience was he was doing gospel music before the message of the music hit him. Yeah. I'm hopeful that it might be somebody like my coworker who was at the Sunday service. I don't know. It's not just a seed being planted for something that's going to, one plants, one waters, but God yields the increase. How do we know we're not looking at, God using Kanye to plant and water seeds for people, and that eventually sprouts up some true fruit?
So I obviously I agree with that. Obviously, I say, because the parable you're referencing, makes that point, and God can use anybody. And I guess my one worry is that it's hard to separate. What am I trying to say here? His message is inseparable from the messenger, and that messenger/message is so wrapped up in celebrity culture. So, for instance, the person who's going to be impacted by Kanye's conversion you can't separate the fact that it comes from Kanye and is a celebrity, and it comes with all the power and influence and wealth, and I don't know, like that. The gospel message comes with almost like an unforeseen toxicity that, if that's not rooted out, you just kind of keep perpetuating the same kind of American gospel, celebrity gospel.
And then the hope becomes
like effective discipleship down the road.
And then the hope becomes that they're not being discipled like Kanye in white evangelicalism.
Right.
Yeah. Because if they're going through what Kanye is going through and being discipled through white evangelicalism, it is going to perpetuate.
Right. Well, it's 2020, man, and we'll see what's going on, man. We got Trump in the office. We got Kanye planting a cultish society up in Montana.
A society.
Whatever's going on up there. I admire this estate. I'm kind of down with that. He's always been kind of a loose cannon office rocker a little bit. So I don't know. He's like the mad genius. He's a genius of an artist, and I don't think he's nuts. I think he's a smart guy, but he's just a little nuts too.
See, but that's the other part, right? Like, do I admire now as a business? If it stays purely as a business,
yeah,
right?
Oh.
creating his own, like growing blue cotton to make blue clothes, so you don't have to dye. Like you talk about cutting back so much on costs. Now, what's that going to do to the soil, right? Like you got to look at that stuff. But like if that's actually sustainable as a business model, that is revolutionary.
Yeah.
Keep the cultish, I'm your leader part out of it, right? Like just keep, hey, you come here, you work here, you go home, kind of stuff happening with it.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. But you've got a guy who is, one, armed with a God said card. Two, he's armed with mental issues.
Yeah.
Like the dude, he takes Lexapro, and he's rapped about some of the medicine that he takes. Like he calls it, he refers to it as his superpower.
Oh wow.
Right? He calls his mental instabilities and stuff that he's dealing with his superpower. Now, on one hand, I admire his desire to remove the stigma that comes along with mental health.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a mental issue. It's not my disability. It's my superpower.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm down for that.
Yeah.
Right? Remove the stigma. Cool.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we got to deal with the fact that the decisions that are being made are made through that lens.
And would you, like, if you took Kanye out of his celebrity status, let's say he's just a normal dude, but with all of his hubris and mental issues and arrogance, would you want him as your pastor?
No.
Minus the platform.
No.
Hire him. Fresh out of seminary, here comes Kanye, his name's Bob Thomas or something. He's got 150 followers on Twitter. But same kind of, like, everything else is the same. Like, would you want him as your pastor? Or somebody you'd look up to for, like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Tell us about your view on sexuality and politics. And
right. But the thing, this dude isn't fresh out of seminary. He fresh out of Bible study.
Right. Bible study.
Right. He fresh off the altar call. You know what I'm saying? he got 2 weeks of new believers class left. Like, I'm not hiring that guy.
At Joel Osteen's church. I mean, I don't know. Whatever.
They do new believers. Never mind. I don't. Yeah.
Hey, man, we got to go. Dude, thanks so much for your time. This has been super interesting to me. We'll see how it goes when I release this publicly. We may get some emails, but hey, it's Theology in the Raw, folks.
Holla at me. I'm at Stephen Patton on Twitter. They can come right for me. Stephen with a V. Come at me.
Dude, thanks for your time, man. Appreciate you.
Same here, bro.
Take care.
You too.